You're live.
This is Senate Transportation. It's Wednesday, January 14th, and we're resuming testimony, and we're here to hear from Logan Blueberry from Joint Fiscal as a precursor to the Oregon Department of Transportation.
Yes, but for the record, I'm Logan Blueberry with the Joint Fiscal Office. A very brief presentation just on some of the fiscal impacts of the Oregons. And then also Virginia if we have time, or else I can come back and do Virginia's at a different date. This is really just looking at the very basics and then some of their sort of revenue forecast, which they might have more information on when they present. I don't know what their presentation will be, but just to sort of give you a base to go into their presentation with. So Oregon's road usage charge program is called ORGO. They currently have a rate that's set at 5% of their state's fuel tax, which is currently 2.3 cents per mile. I guess this is a question for them. I think there's maybe some variation in there, or not variation, but they passed recently a transportation funding bill, which is maybe now not going to be implemented based on some things that are happening in the state. So I don't know if 2.3% is still accurate or if that has been sort of drawn back. That'd be a question for them. But last I saw it was 2.3 cents. They have a pretty or a broader program than the one we've been working on here in Vermont, at least. So they have EVs starting January 1st of 2028, and then they have hybrids and plug-in hybrids starting July 1 of 2028. So it's a larger group of cars that would fall under this mandatory road usage charge than what is currently being worked on in Vermont. They also have a fuel tax credit for vehicles that have to pay this per mileage charge, so you're not doing both the RUC and the fuel tax. And then you're allowed to opt out of sort of the per mile payments, and you can just instead pay a flat fee, $340. That's kind of the gist. And then this is their forecast that I found. This is from October of 2025. So again, this might have been updated. They're estimating that in their first year with just the before it goes to both EVs and hybrids, $16.5 million, and then once all those vehicles are in there, $91.2 million in FY29. The other thing to notice about this, I guess it's just the scale. So they have the motor fuels tax that they collect up there, and then their rough per mile charge, and then the flat fee charge there as well. The other interesting thing here is the red numbers below lines. Well, 6, 7, and 8 really is sort of the cost that they're forecasting out. You can see when we compare it to line 6, the collection administrative cost of the fuel tax, the administrative cost of the RUC is significantly higher. It's only once you sort of get a large fleet of vehicles paying into this that the administrative costs are much smaller than the amount of revenue collected.
And how are they collecting?
How are they collecting the revenue?
Yeah.
I believe it's through a yearly payment during the registration, or you can do the
And who verifies what the mileage is?
So I believe it is through, you can either do the telematics or the GPS tracking through they have a vendor, and this would be a great question for them next. I'm sure they can get into all those details. Is either Oregon or Virginia, I'm getting confused now, has like one where you can true up and take a picture of your odometer at the year end. That might be Virginia's though. So would that be a great question? And then hopefully they will get into the specifics.
Hawaii did at the point of inspection.
Yep.
And
I don't believe Oregon has an inspection process.
I didn't think they did. I'm just trying to figure out functionally how they make this work versus.
I think they use GPS and some onboard diagnostics to do a lot of theirs. Or for people who don't want to do that, they pay the flat fee.
Mm-hmm.
But again,
I like the flat fee part. Sure. You know, it seems in both cases that we've this one and Hawaii that we heard from, there's an election that goes on amongst people, so.
Right.
Hawaii's was $50. This is what did you say,
340 is the annual flat fee if you wanted to opt out of that per mile. So I guess it'd come down to how much you're driving. If you're driving a lot, maybe it makes sense to pay the flat fee if you're not by the percent mile.
And do we know the company that they're using?
Oh, it's on their website. I don't remember the name of them. I think they have a couple vendors and they use one of the same ones that Virginia is using as well. I could find the list. It's on their website. They do have it posted. I just don't remember off the top of my
It
head.
might be helpful to
Sure.
hear from that vendor on what their capabilities are.
Sure.
Go
I
ahead.
think, I'm just wondering if their goal is just to, fix or get the revenue that they lost from, fuel taxes rather than get additional revenue.
That's a great question. That should probably ask them. I'm not
Okay.
sure the intent behind
Cause I
why
thought,
they set it out this way. I know Oregon has had some version of this program in like pilot form for a very long time, and it sort of changed as the years go on. So
And you don't know what their timetable is. Hawaii wanted to by, I think it was 2033, have switched over. So there was this,
yeah,
you started lower and you moved to, and it was eventually by 2023, swap out what they're doing now for the new system.
In Hawaii, yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's what I.
Yeah, no, you're 100%.
but also be revenue neutral toll with the toll system. It wasn't gonna increase revenue, I thought.
Good night. Yes,
It
you're.
doesn't look like they're doing that. Or
Yeah.
So I think if we've got a little basic organs waiting to come in,
Oh, yeah,
and
that's,
we let them in and move right into that.
yeah.
perfect.
Thanks, Logan.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Can you stay?
Yeah, he's gonna be right behind me or someplace.
Wherever he wants.
Not here.
I think he's got 3 seats. back
There's a
there.
chair over there, there's over.
Are we there? Maureen in?
Yeah.
Can you hear us, Maureen?
I can.
Well, we want to thank you very much for being here with us today. My name is Rich Westman. I am the state senator from Lamoille County, which is a county in north central Vermont. And I'm chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. And I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves. Rudy?
Good morning, Wendy Harrison. I'm in Wyndham County. Thank you.
And I'm Beth Hawaii and I'm in Windsor County.
Andrew Kirchlake in Washington.
And Pat Brennan from Grand Isle County.
And we are very interested in what Oregon has been doing, moving forward in the changing funding of the transportation world. We have taken testimony from Hawaii, who has done, and you're one of the 4 states that is in the lead in the country. And so you're our second state with testimony around that. And we have all kinds of questions. So if we shouldn't interrupt you, let us know, but there will probably be lots of questions from us because we're very interested in what you're doing.
That's great. Thank you for that. Then thank you for inviting me. I have a hard stop at 8:50 to get ready for another meeting. But I'm happy to have you send questions my way at any time after so if you get done and you go, wait a minute, she didn't respond to fill in the blank. just send those questions to me or have Megan send them to me and we'll get back to you.
Okay. All right.
So I sent a presentation. I'm going to run through it really quickly and then let's get to your questions. If you want to interrupt me, that's fine too.
Okay.
Let's make this as interactive as possible. So I'm assuming, Megan, that you will share, or do you want me to?
Oh, I can do it if you.
Okay,
I can just ask that overall question about the goal of.
Actually, Maureen, if you're able to do it, it would be best.
okay, I can do
But
that.
there, you should be able to. And I just posted her document. It'll take a second to screen it and I'm getting copies on it.
So Maureen,
Yeah.
the upfront question that we had, that was asked, and we talked about, we aren't clear about, was this, the goal of this to replace existing revenue or to increase revenue?
It was to basically capture revenue from highly efficient cars and put them on parity with inefficient vehicles.
Okay.
So our intention has not been to replace fuel tax. We think that's still a very steady state source of revenue for Oregon. And we've pledged that revenue to repay bonds. So there was a good reason not to upset the bond market by saying, we're going to get rid of fuel tax and have them do a little bit of a freak out. So it was always intended to basically keep fuel tax in place and then add an additional revenue stream to fill in the gap caused by inefficient cars not paying their fair share.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Yeah. So can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, let's try this again. Share that. How about that?
Yeah,
We can now.
Okay, great. So when we started RUC, we were only focused on having a supplemental revenue stream. But then we have been working with the state of Washington on replacing an interstate bridge on the I-5 corridor. And so we were looking at tolling and whether or not we could actually do an intersection of RUC and tolling and have our citizens have one account from which they could pay for both of those things. So this presentation is geared in that direction. And in part, that's because when we set the program up, we were mindful that in our state, we have cities and counties have the ability to enact their own local option fuel tax. And so there's layered pricing in certain parts of the state. So we decided that we would create jurisdictional identifiers based on geofenced locations, and they could also then be used for tolling. So this brings a little bit of that into the RUC conversation. So gonna introduce the topic, talk about the basics, then there is this really good resource that you can refer to. It was published by the National NCHRP, which it's really early here and I'm having a hard time remembering what it stands for, but it's a very good guide about how to get started, about communicating with the public, legislation considerations and those kinds of things. So I'll just introduce that and then we can have a little bit of a discussion after that. So what's the problem? When we started this exploration in 2005, it was really clear that fuel tax would not be a reliable, equitable source of funding in the future. So we did a pilot in 2006, another one in 12, and then launched the Orgo program that we have now in 2015. When we created the fuel tax back in 1919, the idea was that users should pay for the roads. And that's been the underlying funding principle for all of our funding going forward. So when Oregon started taxing diesel in the 1940s, that was because diesel was becoming more of a prominent fuel than gasoline. So they put a tax on it that was equivalent to what gasoline powered vehicles paid. So that's really core to everything that we look at. Weight mile tax, same thing. Heavy trucks should pay more based on the amount of damage they do to the roads. And Our Road User Fee Task Force, which is a bipartisan task force created by the legislature, looked at a lot of different options, battery tax, tire tax, a whole bunch of things, and landed on this pay by the mile scheme, if you will, as a way to fill in that gap created by efficient vehicles. And this actually is a graphic that we've used to illustrate that people are driving more in our state and using less fuel. And that's really the challenge. They're also expecting us as infrastructure owner operators to provide a very safe infrastructure, better lane striping for cars that require, ADAS, stay in your lane kinds of protocols. They want more connectivity in terms of getting advanced notice that there's a crash ahead or that there's a weather event and that kind of thing. All of those things are additional things that cost money on top of just filling potholes and providing guardrails on our infrastructure. So we've seen this increased mileage being driven, less fuel being used, net decline in gas tax revenue. So that's what the gap that we're looking to fill is, that gap between fuel tax and what our needs actually are. And as you know, CAFE standards have been increasing over time. The public is becoming more demanding of having an efficient vehicle to get to and from wherever they're going. And so when you look at federal gas tax not being raised for a very substantial amount of time, and the difficulties in increasing fuel tax, and then in our state, the accusation that just raising fuel tax makes it increasingly regressive, we needed to do something different. So we're maintaining the user pays principle. Everybody pays for use of the infrastructure, and we don't care about your fuel type necessarily. So the way that plays out is, I used to have an old Camry, and I got about 25 miles a gallon, which was a pretty good deal at the time, given the car I'd driven before. But now with Camrys being hybrid vehicles, they get double the mileage. So if you look at use of the roads, they're paying half of what they would have paid if they drove an older Camry. So if you look at the Federal Highway Trust Fund, there's a huge shortfall that will make it very problematic for most of the states to pay for the infrastructure that is needed to move the economy, move people through to recreational opportunities and those kinds of things. So we need a way to fill that gap without necessarily relying on federal dollars. So we look at our road usage charge program as really just a modernized user pays model for paying for infrastructure, where you pay by the mile rather than the gallon. And we think it's a viable long-term funding solution. We are a very small voluntary program, and that honestly doesn't bother me, because we have been building a market for these services to be provided by third-party account managers. So if you think about a typical business cycle or development cycle for IT or anything like that, it's not uncommon to, release something, figure out that user testing requires something a little different, modernize that, test it, deploy it, and keep going through a development cycle. And that's what we're in here in Oregon, is a development cycle. This document here is what we prepared for the legislature last session. So they would have a one-pager that they could give to constituents, or they could use as a guide to talk about the program. We thought it was very important to emphasize that there isn't double taxation. If someone pays fuel tax, it's treated as a prepayment of their road usage charge, and it's credited back as they drive taxable miles. So that's a really key component, I think, of the program. When we went out and did a listening tour around the state with Oregonians, people said, we don't mind paying, for what we use, but we don't really want to subsidize efficient vehicles. And that was particularly true in very rural parts of the state. So I was in Eastern Oregon, and I had a number of people say things like, I drive F-250s and 350s on my farm to get to and from market, go do my business. I don't really want to subsidize Portland Prius drivers. And it's like, well, under this funding model, you don't have to, because they would be paying their fair share through pay by the mile program. The other thing that's really important, I think, for people to understand is that we, by law, have to provide choices for people on how they report their miles. And that means we had to provide them with technology to report miles that did not have vehicle location technology. So when we went live with the device that plugged into the onboard diagnostic port of the vehicle that would capture the miles driven and then report them through a cellular connection to the account manager so they could bill them. Some of those devices had GPS chips, some of them did not, and it was up to the participant to decide whether or not they wanted GPS or not non-GPS. Without GPS, then they paid for all miles driven, regardless of whether they were in state or out of state. And then we provided a mechanism for them to send us a form with an attestation that they had driven X number of miles out of state and they were requesting a refund. And then we processed those accordingly. Go ahead.
I'm, you know, I'm trying to understand what physically you've done to do this. So you give them a piece of equipment. Repeat again what this over, because I'm just functionally trying to understand how they report this.
Okay, so we have different ways of reporting miles. One of the ways people can report miles is by using a device that goes in the onboard diagnostic port of the vehicle. Another way to do that is to send in photographs of their odometer. It's an odometer capture protocol. We actually do not handle devices. We contract with third-party entities. We call them account managers. And people have a choice of signing up with different account managers based on whether or not they want to have a device, whether they want to use odometer capture technology, or if they want to do, some other kind of reporting. So we oversee the account managers. The account managers actually are the interface with the public.
So the account managers, is this one company? Is this multiple companies?
It's multiple. That allows us to give people choice.
And who pays the multiple account managers?
We pay them. The state pays them for providing that service.
Andy.
I have a question about, you decided on a flat rate for the vehicles. Did you look at all about the weight of the vehicle or using something else like the impact? Just that instead of miles traveled, impact on the highways, like heavier vehicles, bigger vehicles?
So in our state, we have a weight mile program for vehicles that weigh over 26,000 pounds. So they're already essentially paying by the mile. And that rate is based on the weight. This program is for passenger vehicles. Anything under 10,000 pounds is doing about the same amount of damage to the road. So we didn't differentiate between weight. There was some controversy about EVs weighing more than regular internal combustion engine vehicles. They actually don't usually exceed 10,000 pounds. They're doing about the same amount of damage as a regular passenger vehicle. So our rate is set by the legislature at 5% of the fuel tax rate. So our rate, fuel tax rate is currently 40 cents per gallon, and people pay 2 cents per mile.
Okay, yeah, same conversation here about those vehicles under 10,000. Doesn't matter if it's 9,000 or 4,000, but you're saying Oregon had data that didn't really matter.
Yeah, our roads are designed so 10,000 pounds is about, like, I would say the average that they feel is so I've had engineers explain it to me in e-cells, and it's very complicated, but basically they assure me that If it's 10,000 pounds or less, it's doing the same amount of damage.
Okay.
Okay, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you.
So you can have a device on your vehicle, you can do the odometer. And then,
And then the account manager takes care of the billing and collection
Okay.
from the individual payers. And they
Yep.
remit money to us on a quarterly basis on all
Okay.
miles driven.
That's a quick question.
go ahead.
Thank you. So, I really like how you say that data is destroyed within 30 days. That probably helps people, choose that, to have the odometer. And the way that you say, if you have an odometer, or not an odometer, but the GPS, what I heard was that miles outside of Oregon won't be counted if you have GPS, and that's your choice to whether or not you have that. So I just think that's a great system.
The legislature was very uncomfortable about both the state and private companies having this travel pattern data for long periods of time. And so they were the ones who decided that 30 days after those miles were paid for, or if they were contested, that it was resolved, that data had to be destroyed. And so we actually audit our account managers to make sure that's happening.
That's wonderful.
Okay. Right. So my understanding this, that if you don't do all this, there's a flat rate?
There is what we call an enhanced registration that goes
Yeah.
on top of the base registration. So efficient vehicles, based on where they're tiered, pay this additional fee, which is waived if they opt into paying by the mile. The thing that is a little different for us than from some other states that have programs is we do not cap the road usage charge payment at what people would have paid through an enhanced registration fee. Because the way I describe it is that's basically giving citizens an interest-free loan to pay what they would have paid anyway. And if they drive more miles than that, then they're again getting a free ride on somebody else's dollar. So we do not cap the road usage charge amount.
Okay.
And I think that's something that differentiates us from some of the other programs.
So, do you want to go through the rest of the presentation?
I just
Okay.
wanted to pause and see if anybody had any more questions on this.
I'm sure we're gonna come back and have more questions.
Okay. So
But-
the NCHRP guide was put together to help people navigate this whole MBUF, RUC, whatever you want to call it thing. And so the Eastern Transportation Coalition has, been working in this for quite some time under the guidance of Trish Hendren. So they've been looking at primarily impact of paying by the mile on heavy vehicles. We were focused more on light vehicles. There's some interest in, should we just do this for interstates? What would this look like in a federal scheme? And so the National Academies of Science convened this program under NCHRP 1918 and decided, let's see if there are commonalities between all these different approaches to using a pay by the mile program. So when we launched in 2015, we were like this little black dot over here, this black hole of, taxation, doing something crazy. And then by 2025, it had started to grow. There'd been more conversation about ways to fill in that funding gap that is common to pretty much every state. And we were part of the founding group that set up the Rec America program. And so a lot of these states that you see here in orange in the West are Rec America states. These are the 4 states with enacted programs. They were all very helpful during the NCHRP work in explaining what they did, how they did it, why they were doing it, that kind of thing. And so this National Cooperative Highway Research Program Guide, thankfully I put it in this slide so I know what it is. It was a way to help people look at paths and strategies for implementing REC at their whatever level. And so based on your role, you can look at, are you leading an effort to through a DMV or a DOT or whatever to set up a REC program? Are you a communication professional? Are you a transportation professional? Are you a policymaker sitting in the legislature hearing all of these pros and cons for why to do this? And so based on where you're at in your program, there are materials designed to help at every stage of development. This is the information on where you can find the guide. It's very interactive, so it's not like a report you have to read. You can actually go and take tests, and it'll give you information and take you to the resources that will help you along your way in that journey. And that's it.
Anita.
Thank you very much. On one of the slides, it says revenue dedicated to highway purposes constitutionally in Oregon. Did you actually change your constitution for this or update it, or was it already?
It was already there. So back in the 1980s, there was apparently an attempt, that was before I moved to Oregon, there was an attempt to take Highway Trust Fund money from the state coffers and move it into another place that needed money. And citizens said, we don't like that. We're paying for our roads to be maintained, and we want that money to stay for highway maintenance and operations. So that's been in place for a very long time. And every time we have a conversation about transportation and some kind of new funding stream, this becomes a topic. Is this highway fund money, or is it something else that can go to like transit, for example?
Oh, is transit included in highway?
It is not.
Oh,
We have a transit division, and there are pass-through for federal transit money, but we do not fund our transit through any of the like state fuel tax or anything like that.
okay. So you have very good clarity on that.
Well, we've had this conversation. We took transportation money in Vermont in 1991 and moved it out of our transportation fund to the general fund. We ended that last year. So it's a little different, but the time frame is 91. We weren't very far behind. Did they do that by referendum?
Yes.
Okay.
This referendum voted people, and that's what we live with now. And the other thing that is a little different in Oregon is we share our revenues with cities and counties. So every time there's a new revenue stream, the legislature determines how that's split. So for fuel tax, ODOT keeps 50% of that money, and then 30 goes to county, 20% goes to cities. The constitutional provisions on how it can be spent attaches that money. So cities and counties are also expected to abide by those constitutional limitations and how they spend it.
So thank you. So that's the geofencing that you talked about.
Mhm.
So that's the mechanism to determine where the like the gas was spent or
Where the travel occurs, right? So when we set the program up, because the legislation said we could only charge for in-state miles, and we have, states surrounding us that have a lot of cross-border traffic, we decided that we would geofence every state and province in North America and create a jurisdictional identifier for those. So there's like, not to go in the weeds, but I'm going to go in the weeds, unfortunately. We assigned each state and province a 3-digit identifier, and then we created optional sub-jurisdiction IDs that could be user-defined. So that meant a political subdivision could say, we're a county, we want to charge an additional rec fee, we can do that through this mechanism. And then the idea would be that the account manager would have a business rules engine that would apply the rate to those different areas. That meant congestion price zones, pollution zones. If you had, were in an airshed that had pollution issues, we were trying to think ahead. And of course, we were starting to look at tolling for the interstate bridge. And we actually did a pilot where we geofenced part of the Portland metro area and charged a different rate. The challenge was actually defining the geofence in a granular enough way so we knew when vehicles entered that zone or left that zone. So there were challenges. It worked, but there were some challenges, and that probably only gets better as the technology improves. But we did.
So I'm thinking back to, I got the choice between the device on the vehicle, doing odometer in that reading in that world. What's the capabilities of the device? So for example, if somebody drives out of state, does it just calculate the number of miles traveled, or can it tell that can the device tell that you've been out of state?
If the device has the GPS chip enabled, it knows that you've traveled out of state.
So if you live on the border, someplace, and you're traveling a lot out of state, you would probably choose the device versus the odometer.
Right.
Okay. Oh, that's
Well-
very helpful.
And I'll tell you an interesting story. We had a participant who was actually in the legislature at the time, who took a trip from Oregon, drove through Washington into British Columbia, then drove east to Saskatchewan, down into Montana, and then returned to Oregon. And he was able to see how many miles he drove in each one of those jurisdictions.
Oh,
Based
interesting.
on how we had geofenced things, the account manager was able to give him information about his trip by jurisdiction.
And I'm not sure the cost of the device versus the odometer with the third-party companies, what's the cost to the state to operate this?
Well, it's very expensive right now, I'll tell you that. Because when we went live, there wasn't anybody providing services in this space. And we looked at the cost of those devices, and they're about $100 a copy at the time. So big startup costs. We ended up negotiating contracts that paid the account managers for system development as a separate line item. Because this is not a commercial off-the-shelf kind of software system at this point. And then we paid them to operationalize and collect all the information and the money and everything else. We paid them a % of revenue. So that's the model we're operating under now. We have told them that going forward, we expect their cost proposals to come in with what is the fixed cost per account and what's the variable cost. So we can bring down those costs and not just have this, 40% of revenue number out there, which is huge. And the market, I think, is at the point where that is going to be a more palatable way for everyone to do business in this space.
Well, we want to thank you for going first.
Yeah.
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 Oh, my life is a guinea pig, let me tell you.
I just feel like I'm gonna say, as we look forward and we look into the direction, you are plowing the future for the rest of us, and we thank you.
I'm happy to share the lessons we've learned, because I have, if I can save somebody the trouble of going down a path that we tried and didn't work for us, I am happy to do that. Because honestly, I think the sooner this becomes more mainstreamed, that will bring down the cost of collection for everyone. And
Yes.
we can start dealing with other issues like, does it make sense to only charge for in-state miles? We don't do that with fuel tax. for example. And in reading some of the case law on the Commerce Clause, I'm not sure that the Commerce Clause requires that either. So I think there are just some really interesting policy questions that you as policymakers get to wrestle with.
Mhm. Yep, we're gonna have to wrestle with it.
Yeah.
More questions? Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I just wanted to know, speaking of the out of state drivers piece, I think, I don't know if there's a way to calculate it, like what percentage I don't know if there is a way to calculate what percentage of our gas tax revenue comes from folks coming into the state, traveling and not being registered in our state. I'm wondering if you did any work around that question, rather than how do you capture the correct amount for someone driving in state, but is there a way to capture those who are primarily driving in state, but not in your state, but not registered or not a part of this program?
We did not do that in our program. So our traffic modeling people have worked on that somewhat, on the number of miles driven from people who say fuel in California or Idaho or Washington and then drive through the state. And with highly efficient cars, it's very easy to do in Oregon. So the traffic modeling people have done that. We did not consider that in this program.
Thank you.
So, functionally, since we have you here, is there any contact people that we could contact to talk to from the device the company that had you with the device? Any of the third-party providers that do the odometer work? If we wanted to contact some people there to talk to about how and contact information for people like that to functionally see how this would work would be useful to us.
I will be happy to send Megan a list of people. For example, Nate Breyer was with Azuga when they were one of our account managers. Azuga was acquired by another company. They quit doing rec work. And Nate is now a consultant with WSP, but he knows this backward and forward. So he would be a good contact. We're working with Next Move. They're one of our account managers that provides, solutions in this space. They're also working with us on development of a connected vehicle ecosystem, for example. So they're looking at technology solutions, not just in Oregon, but in other places. And then, so I'll provide you a list of names, kind of a little summary about what they do for us and the kind of work they do. And then you guys can sort through who you want to talk to.
That would be great. That would be great. Andy.
Yeah. On your slide of the 4 states, it has Oregon of having 900 plus vehicles. But I assume that was in July 15, a 900 number.
No, that's current.
Okay.
So I had this really small core group of dedicated beta testers, is what I call them.
And when does it become mandatory? 28?
Well, that would have been the plan, but the governor just requested that the bill that made it mandatory be repealed. So the legislature can go back and look at the entire transportation funding package that was passed last year. So we're continuing to work on what needs to be in place to support a mandatory program. For example, we're working with auto dealerships on what it would look like to enroll people at point of sale. The first wave would have been EVs into the program, mandated into the program. So we've been working with DMV on what it looks like to give people notice that they have to be in the program based on registration renewal date. We were working with auto dealerships on, like I said, point of sale for new and used cars that are mandated in the program. That body of work will continue because we need to do that anyway to grow the program, even if it's a voluntary program. So we still have plenty of work to do.
Wendy.
Thank you. So thanks for your work and for your persistence, and that's terrific after all this time. And wow, I'm interested to know. It sounds like you have multiple contracts with folks who are collecting the data and your account managers. It sounds like those are private sector folks. That you have multiple contracts as opposed to contracting with one vendor.
Mhm.
You have multiple, and I suspect that was intentional.
That was intentional.
So can you talk about that? Because I think that sounds smart.
So in part, when we launched back so it was an interesting journey. I'm going to tell you a little wandering story to get to the multiple account managers. I had left the Department of Transportation, gone to Department of Energy. I came back in 2014 to stand this program up. And we were supposed to go live July 1st, 2015. October 2014, we still have not signed contracts with anybody to do this. We've developed a system in-house to, capture whatever we need to capture to interface with DMV for eligibility purposes. So we got all these proposals in and we looked at them and we did our own, we signed contracts then with 2 companies and then ultimately a third, but we had to certify their services. So we needed to test their equipment to make sure that those devices they were going to give to the public actually worked. So my team would take devices from the account managers, plug them in their vehicle, drive, and record what the odometer showed versus what the device was showing was the miles traveled. They drove in through Portland into Vancouver, Washington, and back to make sure that the geofencing worked. They did all kinds of certification testing. Some of them were better than others, candidly. New market, new services. There were some glitches along the way. But we worked through that and we went live July 1st. We punch list some items that needed to be like fine-tuned a little bit after the fact, but we made the July 1st cutoff. Competition is good because it actually forced people to bring their best product to market. That was really important to us. We wanted the public to have the best user experience they could. And what was a new emerging market. So that user experience piece is really key to acceptance. We want, as a taxpayer, we want it to be easy to understand, easy to pay, because that's what makes compliance work. That, compliance is all about educating the public, providing them assistance if they can't figure something out, and then capturing the money. If you have to go after and chase them down to enforce, that costs you a lot of money for not much reward. So that's always been the way we've viewed this program is let's make it easy for the public, as easy as possible. Let's make it understandable, tell them why, what are they getting for the money they pay. And we expect the account managers who also provide the customer service, like if the device is broken or it's being unplugged repeatedly, they follow up on that. That's part of what we pay them to do. That makes a difference. People actually talk about their experience with account managers, and they will change account managers if they don't feel that they're getting the best service possible.
So they
That's
can,
another reason to give them choices.
that is great. So can I follow up?
Yeah,
So do you still have multiple, so you still have multiple,
We do.
business companies? Cause you did this 10 years ago initially. So,
And oddly enough, the 3 companies that went live with us initially are no longer in the market. And we've been able to transition to new account managers as they come in. So the way we do that is we have what I call an evergreen procurement out on our procurement system. And if someone's interested, we point them there. That has all the requirements, what they need to do in terms of banking, having an SSAE 18 audit, have their technology being, not something they built in their garage, but something that's commercially available, those kinds of things. And then we certify them and they have, provide the information to the public. We share that and let people pick.
okay, that is gonna be very useful
Yeah,
information. Thank you.
yep.
Now,
Andy.
Maybe you covered this, but I just was reading on your website. So they pay basically the 2 cents, but then they can get a savings on their registration if they,
Right.
and it's at $35 to 115. So how is that? How do you decide what their registration
So
discount?
that registration is the enhanced registration fee I mentioned earlier, and it's tiered based on the efficiency of the vehicle.
So the,
So if their VIN is decoded and says they're in the 30 to 40 MPG bucket, this is what they're not having to pay an enhanced registration fee if they pay by the mile. If they're an EV, it's the highest amount. So that's how that is tiered.
and what is the is there a cap? Not on the mile. I know you said there's no cap on the mileage fee. What's it on the registration?
The registration fee is just a flat fee.
Oh, based on.
That registration surcharge is based on the efficiency of the vehicle. And that's just a flat fee you pay.
Is that $150 max?
115, that's an annual fee.
Right, no, that's what,
And so if you buy a new EV in our state, you would pay $460 because we do 4-year registrations on new vehicles. And we do 2-year registrations on everything else.
you could get that refunded 100% if you enroll in EVgo and
It's foregone. You don't get it refunded, you don't pay it.
you don't pay it because you've registered. Yeah, right.
Yep, you've enrolled, right?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it seems like most of the states that have implemented this or worked on it did it in part because there was a large tranche of federal money that came our way to help move forward and implement these programs. So I wanted to understand how federal funding impacted your rollout and how you made the decision to move towards this program. And then if you have any expectation or understanding of what's going to happen. And maybe there's other news you're getting and what we're getting, but it doesn't seem hopeful for federal funding for these programs at this moment.
That's an interesting question because we committed to doing this before there was any federal dollars available.
In 2015, yeah.
Yeah, so then the grant programs came into place, the SITSFA grants and the CERT grants. We used those sparingly. For example, we used STSFA money to do the local area pricing pilot, which was the one where we geofence parts of Portland metro area and charge differential rates. For us to get a grant, though, we have to go to the legislature and get permission and show that we have the funds in our budget to pay for it because they're reimbursement grants at 50%. And so most of the work we did on developing the program, we did without federal dollars.
Oh, wow. I did not understand that. That explains, I was like, they're missing like the federal money part of your slides. And now it makes sense. It's
Yeah,
because
we did very few grants. Rock America did a number of them, like they did rural studies, and the states that want to participate in that put money in. And we oversaw the contracting here at ODOT. And paid the bills and did that kind of stuff, but that was all matched funds that other states put in, but Oregon did very sparingly used any federal funds.
Well, that's actually a helpful thing to hear because I was very nervous when we were learning that potentially these types of programs wouldn't be getting that support. So thank you for that.
And I will make you the offer that I made to everybody else. If you are interested and you decide to go forward, if you want to send staff out to Oregon, we're happy to sit down and spend time with people. That's what we did with.
We had that offer from Hawaii too.
That's a much better location. Okay? Totally understand, and I will not feel at all slighted.
We invited them back here to go skiing because we talked to the person from Hawaii in the middle of a snowstorm. So
Oh,
Can I ask one more?
go ahead, Andy.
I don't know if you can tell us why the governor was asked for the repeal. Is it just something not unrelated to this as part of the whole bill, or is it
So,
specifically about
that's a
the?
great question. So in Oregon, we have a way for citizens to ask for legislation be referred to the voters. So the big transportation bill passes, which happens about every 6 years in Oregon. There was a petition drive after the governor signed the bill, and the parts of the bill that were on the petition were things like the fuel tax increase, a transit tax that was part of a payroll tax that paid for transit, moving the taxation point on diesel from when it goes in the fuel tank of a vehicle to first distribution like gasoline, and I think it was DMV fee increases. The RUC component of that bill was not part of the referendum issue drive. So petition got 3 times the number of signatures it needed. It was on its way to being on the ballot in November. And the governor went, I don't think we can wait until that's resolved to fix transportation funding. So she decided to ask for legislature to repeal the entire package, go back to the drawing board and work across the aisles to see if they could come up with a bipartisan solution that was acceptable to everyone. But it was very interesting to me that the RUC piece of that legislation was not part of the petition drive.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting.
So here's my final question for you. Because we're almost at lunchtime. So
know.
so what are we missing and what questions should we be asking that we haven't asked?
I actually can't think of anything. This has been a great discussion. I mean, I think the guide will be really helpful to you if you have staffers that can go through it and pull out pieces. The thing that I think was most helpful for us is before we launched, we did a listening tour around the state and we went into communities and we asked the public to come and talk to us. And we did very quick presentation about how transportation is funded. We asked them the importance of transportation in their lives. Explained why we were looking at this as a new funding mechanism. And then a lot of that information was compiled by the contractor that we had doing this work on our behalf. And that's what led to the Orgo brand and the logo. And the thing that I think is interesting about that is the mountain on our logo is Mount Hood. Iconic, Oregon piece of real estate. When
Timberline.
yes, exactly. It's
Oh,
beautiful.
Timberline.
So the company went back out and they said, here's what you said was important about transportation. It took you to beautiful places where you did recreation. It took you to markets. It, did all these wonderful things for you. Here's what we're thinking is the logo. And people on the eastern side of the state said, well, of course you did Mount Hood from the western side of the state. All about you people in the I-5 corridor.
Yeah, that's like.
And so the company actually flipped it around. So that view of Mount Hood is actually from the eastern side of the state.
Oh, awesome.
It's
Like
like.
a view from, yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's beautiful.
Amazon all the time.
Exactly.
And when we've tried to stay in touch with the public, we've gone out periodically and talked to the public about transportation funding. And people generally don't think about roads and transportation unless they're asked specifically and they're in a forum to talk about it. And so when we did our last listening tour right before COVID, we're asking people about it. And we had just gone through horrific wildfires that had decimated the central part of the state. And people said, if your crews had not been out clearing burning debris from the roads, my family would have perished. We heard from people in rural parts of the state where we get a lot of snow that, but for our transportation crews being out plowing those roads, they would not be able to get groceries and medications to their doorstep because they're elderly and they don't drive in the snow. So being able to leverage that information and hear the kinds of questions that we heard over and over and over about costs to maintain and all of that, that's what we base our messaging on, is those conversations with the public. And that is the most helpful thing I can think of if you're going to launch a program, is talk to the public.
I think what's consistent about all of this that we've heard and any outreach that any of us have done to other places is that the outreach to the public is vital in all of this.
Yeah.
And the connection that you can make with the public is vital.
So I owe you a list of names.
Yep.
And I will get that to Megan by the end of the week. And enjoy your
Yeah.
lunch.
And if we have other questions, you're probably going to hear from Megan in that. But we so appreciate you taking the time. I know it was first thing in the morning for you getting to work, but we really, really appreciate that.
Well, I'm going to go have a second cup of coffee. And
We're glad. We're gonna go have lunch.
Thank you so
all
much.
right,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. Bye now.
And Megan, if you would take us offline, this is transportation